This is the third conference in a row. It's been 3 years since we began this project, and we are so happy that finally we get to host you in Prishtina after the previous years in Sarajevo and Tirana. And I'm kind of very especially happy because we are able to do this after there's been visa liberalization between Bosnia and Kosovo. We were not able to invite so easily our friends from Bosnia before, our colleagues from Bosnia. It is more possible to do that now and hold this regional conference after Sarajevo and Tirana in Prishtina. Of course, this freedom of movement does have its challenges, but we are still happy that we can do that without the procedures we used to go through with demanding visas, us and Bosnia at the same time. When we began designing this project 4 years ago, there was very little digital rights knowledge in general. At first, we journalists didn't know much about digital rights, and institutions also did not know, but ignored the obligation and European directions, instructions for privacy rights. This was quite an uncharted ground field for journalists and institutions alike. Ultimately, the worst was that a very old educational system had not allowed us to move in with time where we could educate the citizens. So apart from journalists and institutions, the citizens were clearly not educated because both institutions and media was not informed themselves. We made a deal with ourselves that we've got to start a multidisciplinary effort to make everybody aware of this, because as a team, we aimed for having impact on several directions. First, we wanted to build a new generation of journalists that report on digital rights. And up to this point, our instinct as journalists had been all about access to information. It was taboo to demand closure of information, as digital rights sometimes imply. Second, we had to make sure we educate the public on digital rights. Third, we needed to build a measuring mechanism that would create a measurement on digital rights in all of the Balkans, in Western Balkans and Turkey. We are in the third year of this project, and we are very happy that we have been able to train, up to this point, train systematically 40 regional journalists to use digital rights in their daily work. Apart from this, we have managed to produce 200 media products, articles, publications, videos, and investigation and analysis on the field of digital rights and privacy rights and security of internet. As a result of these investigations and campaigns, many institutions, tens of institutions have, as a result of these recommendations, improved the privacy defense, privacy rights, and every day more journalists, more citizens and journalists are reporting digital rights violations. We think that this is also the impact of people being aware how they can use digital rights. In these 3 days, while you are invited in the conference, and I'm speaking in English because majority of you, guests of us in Prishtina today, are guests, international guests, or regional colleagues. So in these 3 days, we will discuss findings of the report, and the report has been done in all Western Balkan countries, and the monitoring has been done of digital rights in all these countries, and my colleague Megi will present them soon after my introduction. This is the third report that we have included, in which the monitoring of digital rights has been included for 10 regional countries. This monitoring initiative an investigative initiative, has resulted in 3 periodical reports. We do annual reports, and it presents a detailed picture of how digital rights are being treated in the region. I want to congratulate all the people that have been involved in research of these, research and monitoring in 10 countries, the regional countries, and also going into fields where it's not always comfortable to investigate, like misogyny and rights which can be targeted about. In the end, we also have offered a way forward, not just identifying the problems, and the way forward can be found on 50 recommendations that we have done, not just for institutions in the region, but for our sector, media sector, because we think we need to start first with our own backyard, journalism, media, citizens, as civil society, and as well as institutions. Thanks to everybody and the army of journalists that have been contributing to our reports. And finally, I just want to highlight that we expect you to comment, and we expect we would like your feedback, because we don't think we know it all. So you are most welcome to send us your feedback over what you will hear in the presentation of the reports. And if we're missing things, we are very aware we could not cover everything. So my colleague Megi Reçi will present the report, and we expect the president of Kosovo to come at 11 o'clock. If officials are in time, sometimes they're not, but we will keep you, we will very much keep you informed about what's going on, and continue to present the report. So Megi, I invite you to come in. Together with Vjosa Osmani, of course, we will have the EU representative, Eva Palatova, these are the organizations that fund our regional report. Megi, I invite you to begin the presenting of the report.
Thank you, Jeta. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be presenting the report today, and also to have led such a demanding and also rewarding process. As addressed by Jeta earlier, I will present the, sorry. I will present the regional trends in the report, but before I start, just shortly about the scope. We covered the period from September 2024, August 2025, 10 countries, the Western Balkans 6, as well as Romania, Hungary, Croatia, and Turkey. The report that you all have in your seats provides a regional overview initially of the legal trends affecting digital rights in the 10 countries, then moves on to analyzing regional trends in digital rights violations, and then provides 10 country reports for each of the countries. Before going into the analysis, I will share with you the main findings in data. We monitor 7 categories of digital rights violations. They are umbrella categories. They include specific types and breaches, but they're organized as you see in the screen. The majority of violations we found relate to freedom, pluralism of information, economic rights and digital asset protection, and threatening behavior and harmful content. As you can see, they're almost at the same level, and all together they account for around 73% of the total of the violations. From here, we move on to violations of freedom of expression and media at 12.6%. These are the regional data. and digital civic participation and engagement at 8.3%. These two categories are, the results in these two categories are especially concerning because unlike the other ones that are broader reaching, these focus on specific groups, journalists, media, civic actors, civil society. And then the last two, personal data protection and security and technological access and equity. These two are less frequent in the number of the cases. However, it should be mentioned that one of the main reasons behind is the fact that these violations usually take place in secrecy, or they're not published, or they're not known. Some data breach or some connectivity issue can take place, and even the ones that are affected maybe don't realize. From there to the main targets of the breaches we recorded, individuals as a general group, private individuals, face the majority of violations at 62.8%, journalists and media at 10%, political parties and politicians at 10% as well, public officials and institutions and 6.8% of cases, civic actors 5.9%, and private sector 4.4%. Who is responsible for these violations? In a good share of the cases, the attackers are unknown, as you will see, 33.8%. Private individuals are again the ones that are found responsible in most recorded cases, followed by institutions and politicians, and the private sector again. And also a side note on the private sector, the breaches that I mentioned earlier that are less reported are also usually done or happen in the private sector, and due to transparency and lack of access to information, they often go underreported, which could be also one of the reasons. From statistical data to analysis, but before going into the details of the regional report, just quick note or a reminder on why we do what we do and why we should watch digital rights. The cases that will be presented to you once again reveal what we know to be true, that these breaches have human costs. We're calling them costs to make it more concrete. Limited access to essential services, disproportionate effects on marginalized women, minorities, and elderly. AI-driven abuse and sexual exploitation targeting women and children specifically, cyber attacks disrupting even hospitals and critical medical treatments, digital fraud affecting particularly the elderly. These are only a few examples. Democratic costs, authoritarian tendencies that spill over into the digital, surveillance, sometimes abusive legislation, shrinking civic space and media freedom, digital interference contributing to even elections being cancelled, disinformation distorting facts and realities. All these produce costs for democracies, and in the end, financial costs. Fraud, AI-driven scams are some of the examples. Large cyber attacks on critical infrastructure posing significant economic threats among others. The first part of the analysis covers the legislation trends across the 8 countries that we covered. Starting with EU candidate countries, EU accession process was the main driver regarding alignment of several EU acts like GDPR, NIS2 directive on cybersecurity, DSA AI Act. For example, during the reporting period, both Bosnia and Albania aligned the GDPR. Montenegro has a draft pending. However, gaps were identified in all data retention laws in the region. They're outdated, and there is limited oversight in the security sector and law enforcement when it comes to data retention. The NIS2 cybersecurity directive is also aligned in Montenegro and Macedonia. Serbia, Montenegro, Albania have ambitiously committed to align DSA and AI Act. Media laws were also reviewed in different countries, aiming alignment with the EU directives and electronic communications codes. However, some of the challenges regard the fact that AI is widely unregulated and risks remain as it's being deployed at a high speed. Cybersecurity reforms have taken place, but on the other hand, cybersecurity agencies are under-resourced or even delayed in their operations, like Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia. Weak institutional capacities and independence of regulators are also a common denominator, and limited societal readiness. Moving on from candidate states to EU member states and some compliance gaps and even deregulation concerns. In Romania, DSA was integrated in national laws. Croatia only adapted DSA after an EU Commission infringement procedure. Hungary is facing criticism over its oversight of DSA due to concerns of the national regulator. Freedom of media concerns are also present in the EU member states we monitor. Hungary challenged European Media Freedom Act in court. There is anti-SLAPP legislation gaps in several countries, and also provisions criminalizing defamation still in force in Croatia. AI Act, several countries designated their national authorities for implementing AI Act. GDPR and AI Act were also questioned in Hungary with its latest biometric surveillance law. Civil society in the EU and legal experts are claiming that it violates both GDPR and AI Act, enabling mass surveillance of protests and also facial recognition. Industry pushbacks from big tech and deregulation concerns are also another issue. The regulation on political ads in EU in October faced pushback. Platforms banned political advertising across the EU. They're lobbying for weaker enforcement of AI and privacy rules, and currently EU Commission is working on an initiative to simplify digital regulation, which is seen by critics as actually deregulation instead of simplification efforts, raising concerns for the future of digital legislation in the Union, but also across borders and for candidate states like us in the region. Criminal laws also raised some red flags, repression of LGBTQ and personal freedoms. Turkey proposed prison sentences for LGBTQ expression, including reporting, which could affect journalists. Hungary's biometric surveillance law that I mentioned earlier could suppress also expression and protests. Overbroad or vague online speech laws in Hungary, Serbia, and Albania raised concerns of overreach and censorship. However, there were some efforts to address online violence in Albania, Serbia, and Bosnia, also trying to address non-consensual image-based abuse. Now moving on from legal trends to the digital rights violations trends. First, AI facilitation of sexual and gender-based violence, disproportionately targeting children and women. This was a concern across the 10 countries. However, we've highlighted some cases. For example, in Bosnia, there were Interpol-led arrests for AI-generated child sexual abuse materials, but also law enforcement police report a rising number of complaints and reports from women. In Serbia and Romania, we had cases of AI deepfakes of minors by minors, raising other concerns when it comes to also criminalization of these actions. In Montenegro, women activists were targeted with AI-generated videos. Romania and Kosovo saw organized networks of digital abuse, groups promoting misogyny and extremist behavior. In the case of Romania, active for over 10 years, and in the case of Kosovo, with more than 1,200 members. The legal response and also the legal framework has revealed gaps. Legislation doesn't cover AI manipulated content, often doesn't cover extortion or threats of distribution for this content, and almost in all countries the burden of proof for these cases is on the victims. AI-powered fraud and impersonation was undoubtedly one trend across the 10 countries. In Montenegro and Romania, we had deepfakes of presidents and ministers promoting fraudulent investment schemes. In Kosovo and Macedonia, AI deepfakes of doctors promoted fake medical products, also spreading disinformation. In Turkey, voice cloning scams using AI led to losses of thousands of euros, where people received contact or phone calls thinking they're talking to a family member in an emergency, and they made payments to fraudsters. In Croatia, CEO was also mimicked using AI voice cloning, and the staff was tricked into making payments. The challenges, again, these scams are rapidly evolving. Sometimes they're transnational, and they target vulnerable groups, especially the elderly and those with low digital literacy. And law enforcement is often under-resourced to respond. Moving on to another chapter of the regional report, the issue of platform governance versus platform control or content control. Across the 10 countries, with the exception of EU member states and Turkey, platform accountability is not regulated, and users are exposed to both state overreach and abuses from platforms at the same time. We registered several platform bans and also restrictions, in Albania and most of the others in Turkey, usually implemented during politically sensitive periods. When it comes to Turkey, during the major protests in Albania ahead of elections. There was discussions also in Romania and Montenegro for bans, but they didn't go anywhere yet, at least. State and platform cooperation is also another Another issue we analyze in the report, in the case of Turkey, government pressure and market power used and successfully leading to platform compliance. On the other hand, in the region, due to lack of regulation, sometimes national authorities have ad hoc, untransparent platform cooperation with platforms. Moderation gaps were also exposed from the cases we monitored. For example, harmful content like femicide spreading unchecked in North Macedonia, fact-checking partnerships being reduced or terminated in Romania. In the case of Meta also, due to shift in internal policies, they stopped cooperation with national fact-checkers. Again, revealing the legal asymmetry between the EU and the region. In the EU, platforms, of course, enforce stricter protections than in candidate countries where they are unregulated. The next section deals with shrinking civic space and threats to media. I think it's the heaviest chapter in the regional report. The cases show an increasingly restrictive environment, mirroring also global trends, mounting financial challenges of activists, journalists, fact-checkers, and civil society organizations facing growing threats. We have highlighted some of the categories, some of the types of threats. Starting from legal and institutional pressure in detentions in Turkey for online speech or reporting, interrogations or firing in Serbia for engagement, public statements related to the student protests. Reporting on the student protests, everything around student protests. I don't know if Tiana is here, but I think 60% of the cases that we have from Serbia this year relate to the protests. From Serbia to Hungary, SPO investigations against online media and also civil society, media shutdowns in Albania, media boycotts in Kosovo, and SLAPs on the rise across the region, with one example from Serbia, from Krik, who is currently facing 16 of them at the same time. Smear campaigns and disinformation, even going global. For example, Elon Musk targeted Romanian CSOs during the elections, accusing them of destroying democracy. Point Conference was targeted in Bosnia. In Albania, civil society and LGBT activists were targeted and are still targeted as we speak. During this ongoing discussion on a new gender equality law, BIRN has been targeted across several countries, Kosovo, Albania, Serbia, with smear campaigns. Digital harassment and spyware targeting. In Turkey, one journalist alone faced thousands of online death threats. In Serbia, as I mentioned earlier, activists, journalists, students were targeted with spyware. They were also doxxed. Their personal and financial data were also leaked by pro-governmental media, used to threaten them. In Albania, there were coordinated digital attacks on pages of media and fact-checkers. In Hungary and Romania, there were online wanted lists of journalists circulating. Reports on the Western Balkans show there is an increase of online harassment targeting women journalists, and in Bosnia, journalists were threatened online, received death threats for reporting on Srebrenica. One specific trend for this reporting period that peaked after the USAID funding cut was the accusations around journalists and civil society as foreign agents, and accusations related to funding. This event was exploited politically. NGOs and journalists in the 10 countries were accused of serving foreign interests, gender ideology, regime change. This was also amplified by pro-governmental media, and sometimes far-right groups, and weaponized especially against LGBT community. LGBT community were also targeted more directly in Hungary and Turkey. Pride marches were banned. Surveillance was legalized in Hungary. Pride events across the region faced increase in online attacks. Sometimes even dating apps were weaponized around Pride events. In Romania, one organization was threatened, and there were also arson attempts following online threats. The result is hybrid repression that slowly erodes civic space and democracy, and CSOs and media currently often operating in survival mode amid this insecurity and also declining public trust as a result of all the attacks and disinformation. Moving on to another of the trends that we covered, state-led surveillance is rapidly expanding in the region, in the Western Balkans especially, often driven by untransparent procurement and through processes that lack oversight. In Serbia, there is a project, Safe City project with Huawei, which includes deployment of AI cameras across the country. In Albania, thousands of cameras have already been placed in 20 cities. In a similar smart city, safe city initiative in North Macedonia, a similar initiative is also ongoing. In Bosnia, the police operates thousands of cameras, including facial recognition. In Montenegro, facial recognition software was deployed secretly and then deactivated because the Data Protection Authority found it illegal. While these practices, most of these practices are banned by the EU AI Act. For example, facial recognition, as mentioned earlier, also in relation to Hungary. Most of the Western Balkan countries lack comparable protections at this moment, and as I said, procurement and deployment processes are also untransparent and not duly regulated. In this context, where are we importing this surveillance from? Usually, unfortunately, it's regimes and companies with poor human rights records, sometimes already under international scrutiny or sanctions. NCO group based in Israel, the maker of Pegasus, is used globally to target journalists and activists. It was also used to target BIRN's own staff in Serbia. It's barred by US courts and triggered a major investigation in the EU Parliament around similar concerns. Other companies listed there, Anyvision, NCO Group again, and Celebrate are currently criticized for surveillance in the occupied Palestinian territories, also accused for testing surveillance systems on Palestinian population. Huawei is banned and restricted across several countries. Konyit is also excluded from investment from Norwegian government around security concerns. Pressite is also raising concerns in US Congress. Predator was used in US, EU, and Asia to target journalists, politicians, and academics. And last but not least, Clearview is fined and banned by several EU data protection authorities and currently facing a criminal complaint by privacy group Noib. So these are the tools governments in the Western Balkans are using to conduct surveillance for public safety. There has been cases where this surveillance has definitely been misused. In Serbia, spyware was used to monitor, Pegasus was used to monitor, and Celebrate as well, to monitor activists, students, professors, journalists. Celebrity also withdrew from Serbia after these concerns were raised by Amnesty International and BIRN. However, Celebrity is procured in North Macedonia, despite having been used in Serbia for the activities that I mentioned. In Turkey, surveillance is constantly used to police protests, to enable mass detentions. In Montenegro and Bosnia, there are ongoing trials over illegal wiretapping and by high intelligence officials. In Albania, the using of DPI tools to block TikTok has raised concerns among experts around the fact that it can collect sensitive data. It has been used previously in Turkey for similar reasons. However, the government and the authorities have declared that this is not the case. In Hungary, the biometric surveillance law, mentioned several times by now, enables mass surveillance and also particularly around banned protests, as is the case of Pride. In Romania, an AI system is being used to monitor disinformation and emotions and has raised some concerns in the country around the procurement process of a company that was previously involved in fraud. One of the final topics that we covered in the regional analysis deals with elections. Several of the countries, I think half of the countries, held elections during 2024-2025. We have found both parliamentary and local elections. We have found that parliamentary elections are the ones that maybe also receive the main attention, and also the majority of violations are reported around those, while local elections go a bit underreported. Romania is the main case and also the gravest. In the end of 2024, the Constitutional Court of Romania annulled the first round of presidential election results due to digital interference. This is the first time this happens globally. During the electoral campaign, TikTok reported to have blocked tens of thousands of spam content and hundreds of thousands of fake accounts only in Romania. In Albania, anonymous third-party pages were used during elections to spread disinformation. The monitoring that BIRN Albania conducted found that 43 of the overall violations were enabled by AI. In Croatia, similarly, thousands of bots were removed from candidates' profiles, and there was a large pro-Russian bot network that was identified to be involved in disinformation. Privacy and security threats around elections were also present. In Romania, again, candidates and political parties were fined for violations of the GDPR during the elections, collecting personal data of supporters or citizens also from their campaign websites. In Kosovo, Central Election Commission website faced cyber attacks, and Romania, again beating everyone else, the intelligence services in Romania recorded 85,000 cyber attacks from 33 countries only during the electoral period. Platform failures and restrictions were also recorded during the monitoring period, specifically elections. In Albania, platforms often fail to recognize political disinformation or AI-manipulated content, leaving these violations unaddressed. In Kosovo, political parties were fined thousands of euros for hate speech. However, the content largely remained accessible online. In Albania, TikTok was banned ahead of elections, raising censorship concerns and also triggering a lawsuit in the Constitutional Court that is currently ongoing. This revealed once again gaps in regulation combined with weak enforcement of digital campaign codes, reliance on voluntary codes of platforms that proved to be once more insufficient, and allowed violations to go largely unchecked. As final reflections on these trends, once more, it's evident that rule of law changes, weak governance and accountability, and politicized reforms spill over into the digital sphere. So do authoritarian tendencies, and which include targeting of dissent, surveillance misuse, and they call for consistent independent monitoring. Digitalization, on the other hand, coincides with fragile institutions and also unequal access. Digital violations have real-world consequences for individuals, often hitting marginalized groups the hardest, and they also have real-world consequences for democratic processes, as mentioned earlier, more evident in or during elections. Bottom line, safeguarding digital rights is inseparable from strengthening rule of law and democracy itself. I will briefly walk you through our methodology before wrapping up. Throughout the year, we record cases on a monthly basis in each of the 10 countries through country monitors. These cases go through validation, fact-checking, editing, and then are published in our database. We implement a similar process for the annual report as well. Country monitors draft country reports that are fact-checked, validated also through BIRN local offices and our experts, and then based on the data collected all year, the regional analysis that I just presented is drafted. We use diverse data sources, our cases, legal tracker that we utilize within the team, aiming to follow legislation changes, but also investigations, public reports from public institutions, but also academia, civil society. For this report, we also conducted 28 interviews. We reviewed policy papers and also submitted Freedom of Information requests. Methodology was updated in 2024. However, to us, it's a living document that is subject to constant improving. It's a human rights-based methodology. As I mentioned earlier, we cover seven categories. We use a working definition of digital rights in the lack of an agreed one, mainly inspired by the European Declaration of Digital Rights, which considers digital rights, human rights exercised online or affected by or in the digital environment. But as I said, this also is working definition because lacking a universally agreed one, and in an evolving sphere like the one we're monitoring, it requires constant revisions and reflections. As any methodology, it has its own limitations. It's time-bound monitoring, as I mentioned earlier. We focus on a specific period. Data cannot be generalized, it's not representative statistical data. Sometimes data is not publicly available. There is issues with that. We also can have volunteer or publicly reported cases overrepresented in the report because they are accessible and they're public, obviously, while there could be other groups or other areas that are less represented also due to lack of access, maybe due to lack of connectivity, maybe due to lack of awareness. So there is also amongst the limitations of the methodology, in addition to the obvious fact of this being an evolving field, and also the resources needed to conduct this monitoring. The methodology is organized in 7 main categories, each of them representing an umbrella right, further broken down in 3 to 4 subcategories with 2-3 specific examples or types for each. I have inserted a scheme to hopefully make it a bit more clear. It's just one of our main categories on freedom of expression and media. You can see that it's further broken down in 4 subcategories, and then into specific types depending on who conducts the censorship, the nature of the attack, if it's coordinated by humans or if it's through digital means, or if it happens in another environment but it produces censorship or negative effects in the online sphere, which is actually the hardest one to prove and to document. The methodology is also available online, and as mentioned earlier, subject to constant revisions and reviews based on lessons learned from this monitoring cycle. We'll also adapt it in the end of this year to implement it in the next phase. To wrap up, I just want to thank once again the entire team who worked for the report listed there, the monitors in the 10 countries, digital rights team, BIRN local offices and experts for their validation and contributions throughout these demanding and also a very important process for us. So yeah, thanks once again, and I don't know yet if we have some time. Maybe we can also take some questions. I just wanted to stress that also many of the topics that I covered, the regional priorities or trends, will be discussed thoroughly through the panels in these 2 days. So the agenda is also designed to respond to that. But yeah.
I invite people for a question or two. The president is on the way, but we have time for questions. We have a question over there.
Jeta Murtezaj, kam një pyetje. Sa e ka pengu lirinë e shprehjes dhe punën e gazetarëve manipulime që bëhen në internet, dhe sa është sfiduese me I luftu ato?
Kjo është, sorry, I switched to Albanian unconsciously. This is hard to assess because it's also subjective and personal and case by case. But as I said during the discussion of trends on shrinking civic space and media freedom, this becomes harder put in context where civil society organizations and media organizations are facing other threats and are also operating in survival modes, also due to limited resources, and on top of that they have to respond and balance disinformation and also face personal attacks as well. This cannot be easy done all at once. We've had even in October, which is not covered by this report, but last month we had several media in Serbia and in Albania that had their pages paralyzed for weeks. They couldn't, they couldn't report, they couldn't do their work because of digital attacks. For none of them was the first time. These were repeated attacks. They had to stop everything, stop their operations, and focus on dealing with this issue technically, which also requires resources, and it also prevents them from doing their daily job of reporting, just as an example. And then this happens all year and amplified by the other factors that I mentioned.
So now, since we have the president here, we invite her immediately to the floor. Osmani, Kosovo president.
Të nderuar të pranishëm, e nderuar zonja Xharra, të nderuar të pranishëm, nuk po e shoh këtu kryetarin Rama edhe pse pas ka qenë i paralajmëruar. Pjesëmarrës të dashur, sot jeta jonë rrjedh paralelisht në dy botë, në atë fizike që e prekim dhe në atë digjitale ku çdo ditë lëm gjurmë, ndërveprojmë dhe ndërtojmë realitete të reja. Internetin e kemi menduar gjithnjë si hapësirë të lirë, ku secili mund të dëgjohet, të mësoj dhe të lidhet me të tjerët pa bariera. Por përballë këtij potenciali të jashtëzakonshëm nuk duhet të lejojmë që një hapësirë e krijuar për të lidhur të na ndajë. Të mos pranojmë që liria e internetit të përdoret si mburojë për sulme, për shpifje dhe për denigrim. Liria e internetit është kthyer në një nga shtyllat themelore të demokracisë moderne, sepse mishron lirinë e shprehjes, të informimit dhe të privatësisë në universin digjital. E pikërisht sepse është hapësirë e lirë, ajo njëkohësisht është edhe më e ekspozuara ndaj keqpërdorimit. Prandaj shkalla e rrezikshmërisë vazhdimisht po rritet, qoftë për përdoruesit, për përmbajtjen, por edhe për mënyrën se si ndërtohet diskursi publik. Ashtu si liria e shprehjes, e cila jashtë kontekstit mund të shndrohet në mjet cënimi, edhe interneti mbetet një mjet i fuqishëm i cili në rast të keqpërdorimit kthehet në instrument dhune, manipulimi dhe sulmi ndaj individëve apo grupeve. Liria e internetit është një vlerë demokratike, por secila liri kërkon përgjegjësi. Sepse aty ku mungon përgjegjësia, hapet mundësia e abuzimit, e këtë po e shohim përdit. Gjuha e urrejtjes, dezinformimi, kërcënimet anonime, shantazhi dhe bullizmi po rriten me ritme shqetësuese. Të nderuar të pranishëm, sfera e internetit nuk po përballet vetëm me komente ofenduese, por edhe me përpjekje serioze për ta goditur vetë idenë e tij si hapësirë e sigurt e lirë dhe në cilën njerëzit janë ndier më të mbrojtur se sa në realitetin fizik. Një nga rreziqet më të mëdha është rritja e ndërhyrjeve në privatësi, e cila po e dëmton rënd lirinë e internetit. Në këtë hapësirë që do duhej të ishte liri dhe mundësi, po shohim gjithnjë më shpesh një realitet të dhimbshëm, ku vajzat dhe gratë tona, e po ashtu edhe fëmijët, përballen me kërcënime, bullizim, shantazh dhe dhunë digjitale që synon t'u azbeh zërin dhe mbi të gjitha t'u athej dinjitetin. Kjo nuk është vetëm shkelje e etikës së internetit, por sulm ndaj vetë themeleve të lirive njerëzore. Liria e internetit po keqpërdoret nga individ dhe grupe që fshihen pas anonimitetit për të shpërndar frikë, për ta cenuar integritetin dhe për t'i heshtur njerëzit. Përballë këtij realiteti, ne nuk guxojmë të qëndrojmë indiferent. Duhet t'i mbrojmë drejtat e të gjithëve në internet me të njëjtën vendosmëri me të cilën i mbrojmë ato në jetën reale, sepse dinjiteti i tyre nuk njeh kufi në mes të botës fizike dhe asaj digjitale. Prandaj duhet ta bëjmë internetin hapësirë, ku gratë dhe vajzat tona janë të pranishme me dinjitet e jo me frikë, ku fëmijët tanë mbrohen e jo bullizohen. Na duhet një pakt i ri shoqëror për hapësirën digjitale, i cili nënkupton humanizëm, siguri dhe respekt. Sepse në qoftë se nuk bëhet kjo, atëherë fenomeni me cilin po përballemi përbën rrezik real për lirinë e internetit, sepse kërcënon jo vetëm nga abuzimet individuale, por edhe nga mungesa e rregullimit, dhe vakumi etik që shpesh e karakterizon hapësirën digjitale. Të nderuar të pranishëm, Kosova përballet edhe me sfida strategjike që prekin sigurinë dhe demokracinë tonë digjitale. Ju e dini që me qenë se gjua shqipe ende nuk njihet në platformën Google, kjo nënkupton se algoritmet nuk e zbulojnë dot shpeshherë gjuhën e urrëties apo abuzimet në shqip. Për këtë arsye kam zhvilluar takime me drejtuesit e Google, duke kërkuar jo vetëm njohjen e gjuhës shqipe nëpërmjet identifikimit të gjuhës së urrëties dhe abuzive, por të njëjtën kohë edhe pranimin në të gjitha platformat e tyre të tjera, si dhe zgjidhjen e problemeve me llogaritë e zhvilluesve. Një hap i rëndësishëm u arrit vitin e kaluar në dhjetor me antarësimin e Kosovës në platformat Amazon pas takimit që kisha me drejtuesit e kompanisë në Washington DC, si dhe me shumë kompani të tjera, të cilat do ta ndihmojnë Kosovën në platforma digjitale. Ky ishte jo vetëm një hap teknik, por një hap i rëndësishëm strategjik në krijimin e infrastrukturës sonë digjitale dhe forcimin e lirisë së internetit. E ky angazhim do të vazhdojë, ndonse sfidat akoma janë të shumta. Fakti që nuk jemi ende antar në Interpol e vështirëson hetimin e shumë sulmeve kibernetike dhe dhunës online. Megjithatë, problemi kryesor nuk është mungesa e lirisë, por mungesa e përgjegjësisë, mbrojtjes dhe etikës. Nëse duam një shoqëri më të sigurt, më të drejtë dhe më humane, atëherë duhet ta mbrojmë hapësirën digjitale me të njëjtin përkushtim me të cilin mbrojmë realitetin fizik. Sepse thirrja për dhunë, thirrja për vrasje, thirrja për dhunim, abuzimi e bullizimi nuk janë liri e shprehjes, ato janë krim. Prandaj ne së bashku duhet të ndërtojmë një ekosistem digjital shumë më të sigurt. Liria vërtet fillon me fjalën, por civilizimi vërtet fillon me mënyrën se si e përdorim atë. Prandaj le ta mbrojmë internetin si hapësirën tonë të përbashkët, sepse vetëm kësaj mbrojmë njëkohësisht edhe dinjitetin e njëri tjetrit. Ju faleminderit.
I will continue in English because this is a regional conference. Majority of us in the audience are English speakers. And just to give you some context that Madam President did not use her speech to actually tell you of her personal attacks that she and her family has on the online sphere. And I appreciate that. You haven't made it personal. But we are in a country, probably in the only regional country that has no newspapers whatsoever. We don't print newspapers anymore. So what this means that everything is online and it has less and less checks. Every article that goes online has less checks and is more fast and has more damage and can cause more harm than in the age where at least there used to be some editorial time until the newspaper gets printed. So this adds to an atmosphere where we've had this president and a former also female president more attacked than any of our male politicians in Kosovo. So from this context, I really appreciate you standing up and not fearing that what most politicians fear, that if they speak up against media or that highlight responsibilities of the media, they will get more and more attacks back. I think we have to be vocal about this, and you welcoming regional people on this topic, I really appreciate it being today. Now I invite Eva Palatova, Deputy Head of EU, to come and hold her speech, but actually represent the EU that is trying to make the whole debate in Western Balkans more civilized about digital rights. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you, Jeta. Good morning, dobre jutro. Madam President, Excellencies, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, happy to join you for this essential conversation about digital rights and internet freedom. Here in Prishtina, it's an overdue conversation we need to have together. And I want to thank, on behalf of the European Union, the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network for bringing together so many experts and advocates committed to advancing digital rights in the region in Southeast Europe. Your presence here sends a clear message: digital rights matter. Only by working together, we can build resilient systems that protect these rights across the region. We live in a time when digital technologies shape every part of our lives. Their impact on public discourse, economies, elections, and our very identities is indisputable. However, as these technologies grow, so do the challenges. And Madam President just very eloquently spoke about how easy actually it is to use the digital space to split, to manipulate, to polarize. And the responsibility and accountability which goes along to ensure that our rights and freedoms evolve in parallel to technological advancements, and that, as in the real analog world, we behave responsibly in this area. So please allow me just for a few minutes to highlight the European Union's strong commitment to safeguarding digital rights and upholding democratic integrity. Firstly, at the heart of this commitment is the European Democracy Shield. It is a new initiative which you may recall was announced by President of the European Commission von der Leyen as a new European Union-wide project to assert and ascertain our resilience and our capabilities. It is designed to strengthen our democracies against foreign interference, cyber threats, and disinformation. It helps us stay resilient and protect the values we all share. And I want to stress that we count with developing this initiative with the Western Balkans, with our future member states. Secondly, the European Union strategy for civil society supports civil actors by ensuring they have a safe, secure, and conducive environment for their work. Civic engagement is integral to democracy, and it must be protected both offline and in the digital world. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the Digital Services Act. The act which leverages the strength of the internal market and sets clear obligations for major platforms to ensure accountability, assess systemic risks, protect users, and promote transparency, all while safeguarding fundamental rights like freedom of expression. The goal of the Digital Services Act is simple. Innovation must go hand in hand with responsibility. Artificial intelligence brings another set of challenges. Our Artificial Intelligence Act aims for AI to be used ethically, safely, promoting empowerment rather than exclusion or manipulation. This legislation is about ensuring that AI serves humanity positively and in line with fundamental rights. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to acknowledge the impressive work BIRN has accomplished over the past 3 years by drafting its digital rights violations reports. These reports offer facts, analysis, and practical recommendations. They help institutions, policymakers, journalists, and civil society organizations understand the digital landscape and take informed actions. Our dialogue here today is part of a broader effort to address regional digital rights concerns in a comprehensive way. To address legislation, online harassment, and civic space improvement, governments, civil society organizations, and tech communities must work together. Such collaboration supports strong evidence-based advocacy and reform. And you are tasked with bridging the gap between technology and human rights, ensuring democratic resilience amidst emerging threats. Challenges like platform power concentration, algorithmic discrimination, and information manipulation call for transparency, accountability, and collective action. Together, we must work towards integrating effective ethical governance and establishing a future where digital innovations empower democracy rather than undermining it. Let us build the systems that protect users, promote inclusion, and keep the citizens empowered in both digital and physical spaces. I look forward to the discussions ahead and to turning our shared insights into tangible actions that protect digital rights for all. Thank you.
So, unsurprisingly for us locals, the mayor of Prishtina will not join us. Unsurprisingly, because we have a city facing bankruptcy and the mayor is protesting as opposed to being here. This was not the plan a week ago when he confirmed, but he's told us that he can't make it because he's currently protesting. We don't have buses working today, so it's a bit of a chaos in this town in terms of local services that are before bankruptcy. So just to give you a bit of context why the mayor cannot talk about digital rights in this time when there's not proper things working in Prishtina. However, this does not mean that we cannot thank both of our speakers now. Eva, thanks for putting everything in the context of what we all Western Balkan countries must accomplish to achieve EU regulation. And this is one of those moments when I'm proud to say that both Kosovo, even Serbia, Bosnia, the rest of countries will come together in the conference like this. We have participants from Serbia, and it's due to a lot of obligations we all must fulfill to go in the EU. It just makes me slightly optimistic that we might have to come together for many of these practical issues despite other disagreements we have. And there's no issue whether a conference like this is held in Prishtina or Belgrade. We would go there, they would come here. I think this is very important precisely because you are the supporter and donor. This happens. I am glad that we will have colleagues from all these Western Balkan countries to be in the future panels that you will see here for next 3 days. Now I invite Aida Mahmutovic, my colleague, who will moderate. She's a manager of Digital Rights Project, working for the entire region. Aida, I invite you as the moderator with all your panel to come to the stage.